there. I'm letting you know we are recording. So if you have any problems with that, you can do whatever you want. Turn off your camera, turn off your mic, or just leave if you want your name to be seen or whatever. So it's being recorded right now. So great. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to our JALT call forum, playful call, exploring the intersection of games and technology in language education. We are currently spanning at least 3 time zones until Hannah's here. Good morning, Hannah. So we have 4 time zones. James York and I are here in Japan, Tokyo and Osaka, respectively. Vance Stevens is coming to us from Penang, Malaysia. Hannah Khamis is here from Cairo, Egypt. Hannah, say hi.
Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning. Too early for that, but fine. Yes, it is a good morning.
Did you get your coffee or tea or however you start your morning?
Yes, I did.
Good. All right. And Deborah Healy joins us from yesterday in Portland, Oregon. Wow. Deborah, you might like to know that yesterday turned out just fine, so no need to worry. Hannah and I are program chairs for the JALT call SIG. So thanks, Hannah, for getting up so early and helping out today. So let's get right to it. Each speaker will have 20 minutes to do their talks, which leaves us with about 15 minutes at the end for questions. I'll give you a 3-minute warning, or audio 3-minute warning, and an audio 1-minute warning if you're not finished already. If you have any questions, to the guests, hello, all guests out there, please feel free to use the chat and put in your questions, and we'll try to get to them at the end. All right, don't forget to mention the specific speaker if you'd like the question directed to one of the 3 specifically. Okay, James York is our first speaker. James conducts research on the application of games in language teaching. He is currently working in the following areas: the use of tabletop games in task-based learning teaching curriculum, and multiliteracies inspired curriculum using Reddit as a platform for participation in English-speaking communities. James also edits Ludic Language Pedagogy, which you can see behind him there on the screen, an open access journal which publishes research on the integration of games and play into language teaching practices. Thanks, James. Take it away.
Thanks, Brian. Thank you for the introduction. So let's do this. I guess I will share this and share. Is that visible to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, I'm getting the nods, so we'll go with that. Right, so Ludic Language Pedagogy. What is this thing that I'm talking about today? Let me get my little laser pointer, and actually I'm going to be looking at this screen, so I'm not directly looking there. I apologize. So yes, as Brian introduced, I should start my stopwatch as well. Okay. As Brian just introduced, I'm James. I'm the co-chair of the JALT called 2022 conference, which is going to be in June next year, and we have gathered these speakers here today as a little kind of preview of what the theme of the conference is going to be next year, which is playful call, so games and play in call. Again, I started a journal called Ludic Language Pedagogy, and I'm going to be talking about what we mean by this in today's talk. So with my hashtags, things that I'm introduced in, obviously games, pedagogy, teaching. I play taiko, which is a big Japanese drum. Petsy is the art style, which you can see makes the LLP logo in the background here. And I'm also a big fan of techno music. So that's me. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, I'm going to try and set up the background as to why we started LLP. So there's a brief history of games in language teaching. And then I'm going to talk mainly about what LLP actually looks like in practice to see if it's something that you might be interested in doing yourself. Finally, very briefly, I'm going to say how you can get involved in the LLP movement. And finally, some questions and answers if there is time. I'd also like to mention that the majority of the content in this presentation is from a paper that was just published at the weekend, which is actually, it's a preprint. So I'm not sure if it's actually going to be published this year or next year, but me and 2 other people that are involved in Ludic language pedagogy, we published a paper in Foreign Language Annals, which is a much more deep dive into this, basically the history of games in language teaching and why we started LLP. So if you're interested in finding some more details, please check out this paper. I've heard that this paper can fall off the back of lorries quite often. So if you don't have access, please let me know, and we can get that sorted for you. So let's have a look. So what has been done, what hasn't been done, and where are we in terms of games in language teaching? So this figure actually appears in the paper itself, and I did a very deep dive into, what the state of games in language teaching has been over the last, what is this, 70, 80, 90, 10, about 50 years, basically. And you can see these trends coming and going throughout the years. Maybe some of you know these expressions and these terms as they have been used. We start in the 70s with something called serious games, which was kind of looking at games as in educational practice, where the topic or the learning of the game was actually linked to something in real world and something serious, hence the name of serious games. This was not really called games-based learning back in this time. It was just using simulations and gaming as a way to teach. Following on in the 1980s, there was two authors came up with the idea of CLT games, of course, cumulative language teaching games. So I think we're probably familiar with the term cumulative language teaching. And two researchers, two scholars, they wanted to try and classify what a CLT game is. So they looked at the broad swath of games, from playground games to digital games to card games, and they wanted to try and define a cumulative language teaching game where the game was useful towards the goal of teaching a language. Unfortunately, this term didn't really take off. It kind of petered out around here. And with that, we get the rise of computer games in call research. That was a very big topic in the 90s. Wow, we have these adventure point and click games. How can they be used towards language learning? So that is kind of the genesis of what we're going to call here DGBLL. We're going to look at this very briefly in a moment. But then I think it was Dr. Butler this morning. She mentioned Prensky, who came with the idea of digital game-based learning. This was his tome, if you like. This is his book that he published in the beginning of the 2000s. And this DGBL term was kind of adopted by the language teaching research, the call researchers. And that's where we get DGBLL, which is digital game-based language learning. So not just learning, we also have language in here. Following that, around the start of the 2010s, we see the use of gamification as a marketing tool, and that kind of gets co-opted into education as well. So we see gamification coming around here at the same time. And then in 2012, 2013, we have two scholars, Sykes and Reinhardt. They came up with three terms for teaching with games. Game-based being you design a game specifically for language learning. Second was game-enhanced, where you use commercial games for language learning. And then finally, game-informed, which is their interpretation of the word gamification. So it's kind of a course structural reconfiguration around the idea of a game, gamification. Going briefly into where we are now, in around 2016, 2018, we have this term DGBVL, digital game-based vocabulary learning. And for me and my peers who we wrote this journal with, we see this as the crystallization of where the field has come over the last 20 or so years. It's digital games used to teach vocabulary. This seems to be the hot topic in call and teaching with games, and it's everything against what we are at Ludic language pedagogy. It's very narrow, it's only digital, and it's about learning and not teaching. So this is kind of where we don't want to go, and what we're proposing now with Ludic language pedagogy is to kind of split paths with the call crew and do something a little bit more holistic. Finally, I'll just mention it briefly, but in 2019, Reinhardt produced another book called Gameful L2TL, which kind of encapsulates all of these ideas into one term, gameful. Okay, so that's a brief history of the field. Again, I go into this in a lot of details, criticizing it and giving positive ideas about it as well in the paper. So in sum, the LLP focus is here. What we can find as a brief summary of the research over the last 20, 30, 40 years is that there's a lot of papers looking at how games are used in the wild. How are students playing games outside of class to learn a language? There's a lot of papers here. There's also a lot of papers on people studying the game, like how can we dismantle this game and how can we take those elements for language learning. Okay. Next, we look at the learner themselves. Like, what is the student's disposition to learning with games? Do they like games? Do they even play games at home? Next, we have a look at the classroom. So if we bring a game into the classroom, what happens? Do people learn? Okay. Finally, there's hardly any research here, which is, how do I, as a teacher, use a game pedagogically in my classroom towards language teaching? So this is the focus of LLP. People ask me why Ludic, and basically I feel that there, well, not I feel, but I know from my own experience at least, that I think game is kind of synonymous with digital gaming in the parlance of call research or teachers nowadays. If you say game, you basically think of Mario or Fortnite. You don't think of Trump or Resistance Avalon or something like this. So I think this kind of tends to limit the type of research that can be published under a game-based learning umbrella. So one reason that we chose Ludic is to try and separate ourselves from this very digital route that we seem to be going down. Second, we argue that Ludic provides a kind of more inclusive space for researchers and teachers to write about all sorts of playful teaching that they're doing in their classroom. So for some examples here, you can think of something that's Ludic as debate, digital games, drama, language play, live action role-playing games, puzzles, simulations, improvisation, storytelling. So the idea of Ludic is that we're opening up the field to be a much broader set of papers and games that can be written about, essentially. And finally, just to make it even more clear, LLP for us, Ludic Language Pedagogy, it is the culmination of three things. It's language learning focus, it's a Ludic or game or a play focus, and a pedagogy focus. And we see that game-based language learning is kind of focused here. There's not a lot of pedagogy if you look at papers or reports on game-based language learning. There's not a lot of, well, how did you structure your class? What were you teaching? Why were you teaching that? So we think that this is a very big missed opportunity for research on game-based language learning, which is why we've kind of added it as one of the core tenets of LLP. I was a little bit fast, but we'll go into now looking at some practical examples of what LLP looks like after I just talk about gamification. So actually, I'm not into gamification at all. It's not something that I think is, well, we can talk about later, but ethically sound, and it just doesn't rub me the right way. Basically, LLP leverages student interests in games towards academic achievement. Okay, so it's the idea of playing games or using games, which is a student interest, and how can that interest be utilized towards academic achievement. It's probably going to come up later because I know that other people are going to talk about gamification, but education is basically already gamified. We have grades, we have classes, we have attendance. I think that it's personally, I think being transparent with students and saying, yes, you will get this grade based on this kind of performance, and showing them the rubric is a much kind of more humanistic way than saying, oh, you must grind out 20 reading tasks to get 100 XP for your quest. I think just being kind of transparent with students is a lot more humanistic. And then again, I'm not interested in making classes game-like, okay? Game-like does not equal playing a game or doing game-related activities, okay? So I think it's kind of pulling the wool over students' eyes. You're saying, well, this class is like a game. By the way, you're not going to be playing games, though. It's like, well, that's not like a game. That doesn't sound fun. So yeah, it doesn't make it instantly fun. I think that removing the award removes the behavior. So I'd rather look at, remove the carrot, remove the stick, and bring the meaning to the classroom. And if anything, consider self-determination theory. I'm pretty sure that Deborah has this in one of her slides, but the idea of meaningful gamification versus structural gamification, I think the use of self-determination theory is what comes under the banner of meaningful gamification or gameful learning. And for me, you can strip out the word game and just say, okay, I designed my class around the literature on self-determination theory. Okay. So in sum, and this is Petsy art, by the way, this is used with the Commodore 64 computer, a limited character set and only 16 colors. I'm very much into this art. So this is an idea from a paper that, the researcher said, teachers, you must design highly interactive and technical games, okay? And then the teacher, like myself, would be, well, how am I supposed to do that? I don't have the skill or any resources. And then the culmination of this paper that came out just recently was, oh, in that case, just stick with gamification. I think this is a very terrible message to be sending to teachers that, you must be designing digital games, or just do gamification. And I think we can do better. So I have about half of my talk left. I'm now going to introduce what do we mean by ludic language pedagogy, and what does it look like in action. So just like you guys, I'm a teacher. I teach languages in the classroom, and I use games and game-related activities to do that. And here are some of the examples that we have here. I produced a zine, which is a very small, in fact, there's one up there somewhere, but it's a very small 8-page booklet into how you can do ludic language pedagogy. And we made it into a kind of meal. So the instructions for doing ludic language pedagogy: consider your students, think about the methods that you're going to use, and think about the materials and how you're going to mediate the class. Very briefly, this is LLP in a nutshell. You need to think about the methods. Okay, so how are you going to teach students? Are you going to use a CLT approach, a TBLT approach, a pedagogy of multiliteracies approach? Are you going to try and remix games, and so on? So what is your underlying teaching approach? And then we have some recipes here, which I can share later, which actually show how these are put into practice. So think about your materials. How are you going to teach? Why? And what is the goal? Next, the things that you're going to make, the materials. So how are you going to teach this class with games? Are you going to create a worksheet, a presentation, some templates? Are you going to show previous students' work? What roles are students going to have in the class? Okay, so these are the ingredients. These are the material ingredients for your classroom. Finally, the mediation. So what are you going to do as a teacher in the classroom? Are you going to do some explanations? Are you going to model tasks? Are you going to frame tasks in a certain way? Are you going to guide students, assist students, adapt the game into an easier version? So these 3 parts are what you need to consider when you're teaching with games in the classroom, which is why we called it the MMM, which is why it says ludic language pedagogy is way more delicious than digital game-based learning. Okay, so here are some examples of LLP in action. This is a framework that I created called the Kotaba Rollers model, which is basically an extended TBLT approach to teaching languages. It takes about 6 classes to play a single game, where the first class, the students are learning how to play the game. There may be, oh, by the way, the colorful sections here show where gameplay actually occurs in this 6-week intervention. So we learn how to play the game, then we play the game, and you'll notice the students are recording themselves as they play, so they can have a recording of their language. And then in the analysis stage of the game, of the framework, sorry, they will listen to their recordings or transcribe their recordings and look for errors, look for Japanese usage, and try to improve their English for subsequent play sessions. So it's a method around task repetition here. I've got a timer, by the way, Brian, so I should be on time. As a culminating point of this particular teaching approach, in the report stage, I got students to introduce the game that they played to other students in a kind of poster presentation within the classroom. So they were giving a particular rubric, if you like, talk about the good points of the game, the bad points of the game, the rules, why you recommend it. And so again, it's kind of that transfer of learning about the game, becoming a game player, and then reporting on that to other students. So the transfer of language skills here. Another example here is the pro gamer inspired evaluation that I'm currently writing a paper on, where I had students create, if you can see here, short montage videos of themselves playing digital games. And this was then collected for evaluative purposes. So if you think about pro gamers, they make montage videos of their best plays, like, oh, this is the best play that I did in this particular game. I took that and I thought, well, could you show me your best English speaking parts of your gameplay? Send that to me, and then I will grade you based on that. So there was a rubric, and the students tried to submit clips which kind of fit with that rubric. So a particularly complex piece of language use, or a particularly fluent section of language use, or using slang and this kind of thing. They made their own videos and submitted to me. Yeah, hopefully there'll be a paper about that next year. Here is another part of the LLP in action, where we have a kind of chess puzzle, if you like, where the students know the game. and they're trying, the teacher, this is not me, by the way, this is a colleague called Fabio Spano. He created a scenario based on the game and then tried to get them to write an answer in English based on the knowledge of their knowledge of the game and what the particular scenario is right now. So this is kind of accuracy-based activity based on knowledge of the game, which I think is just absolutely phenomenal. It's a really, really clever idea. Here's some of the answers from the students. Who should you send to the room? I should send a blue member. If I send a blue member, so they're using the if here, and again, that's a focus of the class. And there was this one here. Today's project was a little difficult. Oh, these are junior high school students, by the way. But we can solve questions because I talked to other people I'm exciting for next game. So, you know, some great feedback and reflection on the gameplay. This is a project called the Game Terraquea by Jonathan Dehaan, and he has students play games and do very deep analytical activities after they play. So they played the game Diplomacy for about 5 weeks asynchronously, and then they came together and they discussed what they learned from the game. Don't trust friends, you can lie, this kind of thing. And finally, I think this is the final slide. Again, not just playing games, but actually thinking about them and how they connect to language and society and other things. So it's using games as a kind of springboard into more deeper activities and thinking afterwards. This is one that I used with my students to, this is basically a project where they didn't play games, but they joined Reddit communities based on the game that they liked. They didn't have to join game communities, they could join anything. But this student is showing use of cyber pragmatics here, essentially net slang. And again, this is something that came up in Butler's talk this morning. Dr. Butler, I should say, that was a bit rude, but she talked about students' use of slang, and again, I tried to teach them how to use Reddit parlance in the classroom. And just one thing here before we move on to the final slides, but all of these teaching materials, the frameworks, how we did this, they're all available for free at LLP, which is, you know, we have a particular submission style called the walkthrough, where we ask teachers to just walk us through how they have taught with games. And all of these materials that you can see here are all available, all the teaching frameworks, the TBLT framework, the multilingual literacies framework, everything is available. How to get involved: read our journal over at llp.org or come and join our Discord community. Boom, about 40 seconds to spare. So yeah, and there's some references here. So yeah, thank you for that. Sorry for going so fast. Now then, stop the share. Pause share.
Okay, go ahead, Hannah. And Deborah, could you put your slides up?
Yeah, I'll put my slide up. Okay.
Thank you, James.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. That was real interesting start for my morning, and I hope for everyone else's here. Thank you, James. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm Hana Khamis. I am JALT Call SIG co-chair with my fellow colleague Brian Tiemann. I'm so pleased to be with you, introducing one of my most favorite scholars and call trainers ever. She's been a renowned member of the TESOL community and call community in particular. I mean, we go back to, let's say, as early as 2001, and I'm sure she's done a lot more before we met. I had the luck to be her assistant trainer doing, I didn't do much then, I remember, just, you know, helping out here and there for the logistics of the event. She actually, with the trainer, so we had Laura Healy and Leslie O'Buckley. We cannot ever forget them for all the knowledge they've actually taught us and trained us on back in time. She is she was past president of TESOL International. That was like 2 years ago, I think. Yes, 2019, 2020. She's taught online and face-to-face. She's associated with several, gaming, the early trials of gaming and gamification. One most famous one was Trace Effects, if my memory saves me here, I think, Trace Effects. I can talk a lot about her books and papers and field of research. However, okay, I would like us to listen from her. And allow me now, ladies and gentlemen, to actually give it away here and give you that treasure I actually, in my mind and heart throughout the journey here, professional journey in call. Take it away, Dr.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Hannah. It's been a pleasure working with you over these years. I'm going to take a slightly different tack from James, though I will also be talking about fun and games as essential elements of teaching. I'm going to take a teacher focus throughout my talk with a motivation and a little bit of psychology perspective when looking at games and gamification. Now, when we start with the classroom considerations for using anything, we start with what are the learning objectives. So this is always going to be the first place that you need to start, no matter what you're doing. Another element is to know your learners, because some people are really into competition, some people are not. Different things motivate different people. And if you think about TESOL's 6 principles for exemplary teaching of English learners, principle number 1 is know your learners. If you don't know who they are, you're going to have a hard time designing the right use of games or gamification to suit them. And we want things that actually will motivate and not just spend time. So if we look at using games, I'm going to talk about different kinds of, very briefly, about practice games and then some scenario-based games. On the last slide, you'll once again see the websites that I referenced, that you'll find all sorts of stuff on, much more than I have time for here. So when we think about games for learning, a lot of them have extrinsic rewards. You win, or you end up first, or you get it all right. Well, getting it all right is really more of an intrinsic reward. You achieved something, you've completed it. And as teachers, we're going to be focusing on the learning objectives again, but keeping in mind that they're not just linguistic. Our learning objectives are also social and behavioral. We want people to collaborate, not just be out there trying to beat each other. What I have here on this slide are some different examples here with a crossword puzzle. And I think that all of these things are done really well in teams. If you have a large class, it's definitely the way to go, even with a smaller class. Teamwork is going to be more collaborative and produce more language. Another very fun one for more advanced learners is the 5-minute mysteries, or similar things to 5-minute mysteries, where it requires careful, detailed reading to find the clues and figure out the mysteries. So the 5-minute mysteries take a lot longer than that for language learners, but there are still ones that, by careful reading and attention to detail, your high intermediate to advanced learners can do well with them. And you have the, wow, we figured it out, the thrill of doing that. Kahoot, many of you may be familiar with. You can do a lot of drilling with Kahoot in a fun way, because you've got team mode as well as individual mode. And it's a nice thing to do, as is Jeopardy. I put Jeopardy up here as an example of game templates that you can get. So if the teacher is using a game template for something like Jeopardy, you can create something that really fits your class, so that you've chosen your learning objectives, you've chosen the things that will actually fit what you want your learners to come away with. But even better than the teacher creating it is asking the learners to contribute to creating it. Because if you have something that where your learners are going to be able to say, whoa, that was my question, or that's something that I put in there, it's really motivating for them. And the other really good thing about that is the more that your learners do to contribute, the more work they do for you. They learn better and you do less work. What's not to like? It's wonderful. The next thing, very briefly, are what I call scenario-based games. Now, Vance is going to talk a lot more about, Minecraft. But scenario-based games are where you are in a simulation of sorts. City building games like Lynn City or Civilization, or Diplomacy, as James mentioned. These are all things that you can do in a longer time frame to create, more language. With games like these, think about how much of what your learners are doing is in the target language and how much is not. If you've got lower level learners, they may not be able to do a lot of planning in the target language, but you can have them produce something. You can have them talk about what they did in the target language so that they can still interact with each other and have something to say. And it's okay if they're doing it in their own language, if they end up with something of value in English. So those are a few things. What I think is really beneficial from the social behavioral side are games for change. These are simulations. They are things that Jane McGonigal talks about as games for good. She's a game designer. Rather than being games about killing and mayhem, you can have games that encourage people to think more deeply and maybe do better things. Two of these are from the United Nations, My Life as a Refugee and Stop Disasters. The Urban Ministries of Durham one is called Spent. And it's where you have students who don't understand how people can be living on the street. How can there be homeless people? Why don't they just work? This is a good way to say, this is how you end up without money. So it's a really nice reality check for some learners and builds empathy for people who are having difficult financial times. And Way is a really cool game because two strangers who don't speak a common language have to learn to interact with each other. So these are all games that really bring you into a different kind of reality, deeper thinking, critical thinking. So these are games that go beyond practice into something that is, a game for change, a game for good. So that's a quick review of games. Oh, on the Edzilla site, you can find my resource list, and that has all this stuff and more. Now, let me talk very briefly about gamification. And I understand what James is saying about not liking it, because you are creating a game environment in the classroom. I've done this mostly with pre-service teachers, people who are learning to be teachers. So it was a way of teaching them this technique and letting them come to the decision of whether they liked it or not. But I've found, even using it with a variety of people, it's interesting. Like anything in teaching, it can be done well or it can be done poorly. You can use a textbook poorly, you can use games poorly, and you can do gamification poorly. It's not an easy fix. So I think, any administrator who says just gamify doesn't understand it. So I'm going to talk a bit about psychology and game mechanics. And of course, as our plenary speaker today said, Dr. Butler was talking about our students are gamers. They use game as a verb. They are people who are immersed in games. And if you do gamification well, it does help students achieve the learning outcomes. It helps them move from extrinsic, the points, to intrinsic motivation, succeeding because you've achieved something. The reason that I got interested in gamification, though, was this third piece, always moving up. There's a nice video that I watched that talked about this too. And when you have students who walk into your class the first day, I mean, first day of class, everybody walks in, they're all thinking, I'm going to do great. I'm going to get 100%. I'm going to get an A. I'm going to do great. And with every assignment, with every quiz, with every test, unless they're one of your superstars who gets 100% every time, they drop. It's not 100%. It's maybe 95, maybe 90, maybe 85. You drop. With gamification, though, and points, you move up. Everyone starts at 0. And then you go to level 1, level 2, level 3. The idea is that your points are meaningful because you're achieving something with everything that you do. And that's where we get into the psychology of gamification and self-determination theory. Deci and Ryan have written extensively about it. The idea that motivation comes from a sense of autonomy, that you have choice, a sense of competence, that you have skill, and a sense of relatedness, that you have connections with other people. And if you've got these things, then you should be motivated. So this is why, okay, you gamify, you give people some sense of autonomy and competence and relatedness, and you reward them with points. But they found that it didn't always work. And one of the reasons that it didn't always work was just getting points for the sake of points isn't meaningful. And if it doesn't mean anything, it's sort of like, you know, the teacher saying, good job, when you know you've not done a good job. It's not helpful. So you want it to be meaningful, which is why points for actual achievements has to be part of gamification. And of course, you've got a bunch of game-based mechanics. The things that make games games are what makes gamification gamification, because the definition is the use of gaming and game mechanics in a non-game environment, say the classroom. But we do some of these already. We just don't call them what they're called. I mean, we do onboarding. We lead students in gradually. We give them scaffolding. We have team play, competition. We give feedback. If students are writing for a broader audience, they have ownership. They may be keeping things in a portfolio, which gives them inventory. But one of the things that they don't have in a lot of our classes is a clear sense of progress. When you are in an EFL setting, you don't have that, oh, gee, now I can go talk to the grocer and buy what I want. Instead, it's, yeah, you're doing okay, you're getting grades, you know, but you don't have a sense that you're getting better. But with the points, badges, and levels, when they are meaningful, they show you your progress, that you are getting better. You also have challenge in a variety of ways and epic meaning. If you're doing things outside the classroom, you're getting at this concept of epic meaning, something that's more than just for the teacher. I mean, our good students will do things because we ask them to. It's for the teacher, but it's not meaningful, to be frank. They'll do it, but it doesn't mean much. Whereas if you're creating something like project-based learning, you're going outside the classroom, then you have epic meaning. The other thing in games is this idea of recovery, that, you know, in video games in particular, you don't just die. That doesn't end the game. You can recover. And that's part of creating a real gamified environment. You have a way for people to regain, to earn points in a meaningful way. And it can be fun. So those are a few game-based mechanics. So there are ways of getting started. I'm going to talk a little bit about some words, the process, and a few tools. You can start you start with your learning objectives, but as I'll talk about in a minute, but we also can use words to help give that game feeling. Group work is party or team, competition is player versus player. Stars can be badges, things that are meaningful. Grades, not exactly the same as experience points, because experience points move up and grades don't. A unit or a body of knowledge that you've achieved can be a level. Instead of calling it homework, call it a challenge. A large project can be a quest. Your rules are constraints, like game constraints. But perhaps most importantly, it's not a student, it's a player. Because students sit in their desks, players are active. So it's a change in mindset for it. So if we look at the process, you're going to start by deciding, are you going to try to do your whole class or part of the class this way? You're going to set challenges and quests. Again, they need to be meaningful based on your learning objectives. You decide the points. If it's more valuable, it should get more points. You plan the rewards. So a couple of these are badges that are, the round ones are badges that you can create from a website. The other two were badges that were created by one of my students for additional points. Oh, and one of the things about points, I didn't just do experience points for homework. I also did collaboration points. And to pass the class, you had to have collaboration points where you demonstrated the things that you've done with other people, as well as the things you did on your own for homework and your assignments and your tests. As a teacher, you choose what's valuable. You choose what you reward. And as long as it's meaningful, it's a good thing to do. Then you're going to rename. Assignments become challenges. And finally, you explain. You need to explain what you're doing so that people, it's not a secret. People understand what's going on. If you're working with children, they're already in a gamified environment. If you're working with adults, this is a shift. Changing from grades to points is a huge shift, and you have to explain. And you explain it based on learning objectives, psychology, and motivation. So, and a few of the tools, Class Dojo is a cute little tool that lets you assign points on a cell phone, and so you can use Moodle to have gamification elements or game elements in Moodle if Moodle is a platform that you're using. Classcraft, I think of it sort of like Minecraft, though it's not. Because with Classcraft, you create a visual adventure game environment, but with classroom assignments in it. It's very beautiful, takes a lot of work by the teacher, and it works best if you have a bunch of devices in your classroom that your learners can be using. But it is beautiful, it's very cool, and definitely you have this adventure game feel with Classcraft.
Okay, 3 minutes, Deborah. Just
Okay.
a reminder, thank you.
So I am almost finished here. Some of the best reasons to do this. Again, you can do it badly. You can do anything badly. Your textbook you can do badly. But if this is done well, games are familiar. They're fun. Gamification can feel familiar because we see it all the time in business. If you get points for going to, say, Starbucks, like some people, then you've experienced that aspect of it. But that's also why you explain what you're doing in class so people know. You can also make it motivating to our less motivated learners. You can make practice and learning more interesting, whether it's with a game for change or it's with something that appeals to them in terms of what they're doing for practice. Word attack in the 1980s was hugely popular with our students for vocabulary learning. I don't know that I would count on it these days, but what is interesting for your learners, depending on the individual, is something that's worthwhile and will motivate the less motivated learners. And with gamification, the sense of progress. You can add this to a non-gamified class, but we rarely do. We rarely have that concrete sense of I'm getting better in our classes, especially if you watch your grades drop over the course of the class. And then you can reward more than just academics. You reward better behavior. You reward collaboration. You reward acting as a team. And yeah, maybe as teachers, we should stick with the, the academic side, but we're humans and we need to use our ability to encourage better behavior in our learners as well. Finally, last slide here. You can find the resources, online resources for ELT games, gamification for EL teachers, and this is a QR code for my website that has links to all of these things. So this was a lightning fast, sorry about that, and I did speed through this quite rapidly, but you will get it on the recording, and you don't need, yeah, I see in the question, losing points. You don't, okay, well, that's something that we can talk about later in the Q&A. I'm going to stop here. Okay, so thank you so much for listening, and I'll wait for the Q&A to get into anything else. All right, let me stop sharing.
Thank you, Deborah. That was again another refreshing outlook here on games and gamifications. Now it's time to introduce our third speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, we're in for a real treat today. Listen to James and Deborah. Now, let me introduce Van Stevens, our guest speaker, a man who's been the driving force behind TESOL International, Electronic Village Online, and CALL intersection. He's actually worked with generations and generations of teen, what we call webheads, because he's the founder of that, webheads, and a later community now called Learning Together. Well, he claims that he's retired. I don't believe you are retired, Vance, so allow me to disagree. So we're in for a very interesting outlook on a game he actually has done a lot of work on and trains again, a group of teachers. I'm sure they are quite a number in EVO, which is Electronic Village Online. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our speaker, Van Stevens. The title of his segment here, presentation, is about leveraging learning, language learning through the participatory culture surrounding Minecraft. You take it away from here, dear Vance.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Am I audible, visible? Everything okay? Thumbs ups?
Everything looks good.
Okay, all right, I've started my timer. So I'm talking, as Hannah said, about leveraging language learning through participatory culture surrounding Minecraft. And I have slides and a write-up. I always do both. That's so if I waffle a bit and we don't quite get to the end of it, you can read to the end, and the end part is presenting data and stuff like that. So that's as easily read as me telling you about it. But basically, if you want to bring the slides up, you'll find that in the slides you've got on your screen, all the links are hyperlinked. And there's a QR code if you're really fast, okay, because I've got to move on in my presentation. We're being closely timed here. So the purpose of my presentation, I guess this is the most important thing, is that what I stress in what I do in Electronic Village Online and EVO Minecraft MOOC, which I've been doing since 2015, is to bring teachers into this dynamic of gameplay. And it's important that the teachers have to be in the game in order to understand what's going on there. So that's the part of the description that I would just like to stress right now. So now, this presentation is not going to explain what EVO is, Electronic Village Online, or what EVO Minecraft MOOC is, but I gave that presentation at the TESOL virtual conference just recently. And just like I've done for this presentation, you can watch the video. It's right there in the slides you may have up on your screen now. It's a 20-minute video. And you can also see the slides themselves, and you can read the write-up. And if you're interested in, and in the video, I've included videos themselves, videos of us playing Minecraft. So all that kind of explanation is there. What I'm planning to do, sorry, I'm trying to move ahead. How do I move ahead? Okay, there we go. Sorry about that. I just clicked on the window and it played the video. Okay, so here, what I'm going to talk about today is why, as I said, why you have to play Minecraft in order to understand its use in language learning, and how gamification and games-based learning encourage students to spend time on their goals, and how Minecraft helps people to do that. And I have a sort of a skewed interpretation of gamification, which I'll present as well. And the last thing I'm going to do is talk about what teachers have said about how they use Minecraft in their in their teaching. And just to give you an overview of the presentation so you'll know what's coming, I'm going to talk first about a book that Nicholas Carr wrote about called The Glass Cage. He has an interesting description there about his getting into the flow in a game. That anyway, that's it just shows you a little bit about how game design can contribute to learning and gamification. And then I talk about James Paul G's distinction between big G and little g games. Basically, as far as Minecraft is concerned, Minecraft is a little g game, the software, and the big G game is learning languages, if that's what we're doing, or learning whatever it is you want them to learn. And then I tried to explain how Minecraft, in my view, has both game-based and gamified elements. So I'll show you some examples there. And finally, as I said, what teachers say about these things. Okay, so Nicholas Carr's book on The Glass Cage is about automation in, well, it's a follow-on from The Shallows. And you can read the book yourself. There is a full text version. And if you want to bring it up, you could scroll down there to interlude. The interlude has to do with Red Dead Redemption. This is a video game that Nicholas Carr apparently was writing as a break from the book that he wanted to while he's writing his book, he took breaks and got into Red Dead Redemption, and he learned some things about how he was pulled into the flow of this. So it's a very sophisticated game, as you can see from these screenshots. And it basically, he writes about how he's formed an alliance with a grave robber named Seth Briers, and he needs Seth to take him to some people he needs to move on in his game. But in order for Seth to do that, he has to drive a cartload of fresh corpses to a town called Tumbleweed. So he says, I drove Seth's horse-drawn wagon while he stayed in the back, rifling the dead for valuables. When he tried to cross a rickety bridge, the weight of the bodies shifted and he lost control of the horses. And he did this over and over again, and he kept dying at this point. But he kept into it so assiduously that he eventually solved the problem. And here's the takeaway from that. He says later on in that interlude that video games tend to be loathed by people who never played them. But his point is that they're a model for the design of software. They encourage development of skills in kind of the ways that Deborah has been talking about. You get challenges of increasing difficulty. There are rewards for doing well. And flow is very important. And people who don't play video games don't experience flow in this connection. And that's why it's so difficult unless you actually get into a game and play it, why it's so difficult to understand really what we're talking about here. So now then, another interlude, my own interlude. What is gamification? There's been some discussion about this in our pre-forum chats with one another. The definition that I see most often is gamification is the application of game design elements and game principles in non-game contexts, which, okay, I accept that. But I found a website, gamify.com, which adds a little coda there. It also says it can be, oops, sorry about that. It can be also designed as a set of activities and processes to solve problems by using or applying the characteristics of game elements. And also, that's one little cadge on that principle. And another one is what exactly is a game. So games, as I've pointed out, go from big G to little g, or vice versa. So I see Minecraft as being a little g game in the big G game of language learning. So if you're playing that game, you're in the game. It's hard to tell where the game-based elements are and which game they're affecting. So there's a blog post I wrote about James Paul G, and you can click there if you want to read more about it. This idea of the game, like the game of school, for example, has been around a while. I came upon this reference by Robert Fried in 2005, and I was interested in that because I was looking for Steve Hargadon's take on the game of school, which is something more recent. I think he started this in 2019, but his idea is that students play the game of school. They learn how to play the game of school, not really learning how to play the big G game of life. And his project here is an exploration of that. So if you're going to talk about gamification and what's a games-based context, you have to maybe expand your definition of games, because in a way it's all a game. So the gamification applies across the board. How do you like that? Did I weasel my way out of that distinction? Okay. In my point of view, Minecraft has both games-based and games. Sorry, I'm trying to see my screen. Okay, both games-based and gamified elements. And one example, there's a link here at the lower left of this slide, phishing data collection scenario that was described in VSTE Minecraft Monday, that's Virginia Society for Technology and Education. And they set up, and by the way, we are teachers who go into Minecraft to learn how to use it with students. And so they showed us this game where they taught us how to fish. And fishing itself is a gamified activity in Minecraft, in my view. And they, in Discord, they posted a spreadsheet, a Google Doc spreadsheet, and we were supposed to go through and record the number of fish we caught, where we caught them, that sort of thing, what we caught them with. And this is, it's irrelevant for this particular context, but it's something that you could apply. You can see how a teacher can use Minecraft to devise some data-driven learning. Another good example, Minecraft is a platform for a game. Another VST webinar is where teachers created a house and they stored ancient scrolls and chests in the house. And the students came along and had to retrieve the pieces of scrolls and mount them on the walls and then reorganize them so that the message emerged. The students really got into this. We had some students here doing this. And the pieces stored in the chests all make part of a larger story. And this it could be for a literature class, or it could be, I haven't started my video. There we go. Okay, so it could be for lots of different subject matters, but it certainly lends itself well to language. And again, it's an example of manipulating Minecraft as a platform for games-based learning. So then for gamification, in my view, Minecraft is full of gamified elements, and in the sense that in the definition of gamification, where it's to solve problems using characteristics of game elements. And fishing is a good example. everything you do in Minecraft sort of adds to your abilities. For example, you're attacked by mobs. One of the mobs is spiders. When you kill spiders, a simple thing to do, you get their string. When you get their string, you can craft other items. So you can make fishing poles, as you can see here. You can also make bows and arrows. So once you start fishing, you get experience points for fishing. You don't only catch fish, you might catch other things like books, enchanted books, for example. You can see one in the lower left graphic. So you might find a book that would help you enchant an item. And you can also use fish to tame cats. Cats will bring you feathers at night. With feathers, you can make arrows. Or you can trade with villages to get emeralds and exchange them for arrows. And this is kind of interesting, so I'll show you this. Now, there's a link here at the bottom of this video, which is queued to, it's from my TESOL 21 virtual presentation. So if you go to that place in the video, you'll see us walking around and going up these stairs and finding these villagers here who have things to trade. You right click on a villager and that villager shows you what he has to trade. That can be a sheep. So emeralds is the coin of the realm in this kind of trading. But if you had say the string and you can trade 44 strings to a fisherman so he can make his fishing poles and he'll give you an emerald. You can then go next door to the Fletcher and you can give him an emerald and he'll give you 16 arrows, which is kind of hard to get in Minecraft because arrows are difficult to craft. You have to get flint, that's the main part. So anyway, you can read more about this at some of the links that you see on this page. So now what, in the presentation that I mentioned earlier in the virtual conference, we did a tour of Minecraft and we had teachers meet us in Minecraft. Mostly it was moderators. There was also a lady named Kamala who was a non-native English speaker participant in our course. And at the bottom of that page, you see a link to the transcripted data. I put that, so I'll change that. So I like these dynamic slideshows. So I transcribed the whole conversation, and I then divided the different categorizations of the kinds of things that teachers talked about. And these links actually work, and they take you to Stevens 2021, which is where I wrote more on this topic earlier. But it's not so well organized as I'm trying to do right now. What I'm trying to do for this presentation, I took these categories and I made 3 broad categories, and I color-coded it for you to make it a little easier for you to follow. So the red are the categories. There's paradigm shifts in teaching and learning. And then there are subcategories under that in blue. So where you see blue text, those are subcategories under the main text. And the 3 categories are paradigm shifts in language teaching and learning, target language acquisition, and life and literacy skills. What the teachers said about how their students were learning these aspects from playing Minecraft. Okay, so if we go into the first one, paradigm shifts in teaching and learning. And the 2 things that I identified there, how teachers and students depart from traditional learning. This came up a lot in our conversation. Don Carroll, one of our moderators, said that you have to move away from traditional ideas of language teaching. Oh, and by the way, this is all taken in context, so you can find the context in other links, the links I showed you earlier. You can find the whole transcript. But excerpting from what he said that you don't necessarily start with the past tense and then try to teach that in Minecraft, but language kind of emerges from Minecraft. I'll talk more about that in a moment. But Minecraft isn't like, okay, I'm going to teach these language points. Rather, I'm going to play Minecraft and the language will come in through that. So it's acquisition, which we can assume occurs, but then in this part of the presentation, I'll show you where I've actually got some qualitative data to corroborate that. So a lot of people ask about, well, where's Minecraft in the curriculum? And the answer is that the curriculum is in it. I heard that in the podcast one time, and I keep repeating it. Mariana Smolchitz has a son named Philip, two sons actually, Philip and Domagoy. And she wrote an article about how her sons became fluent in English using Minecraft by playing the game with students. They're in Croatia, so they speak Croatian, and their father doesn't speak English, and they so they learned basically through interacting with other students in the participatory culture around Minecraft. And then Mariana pointed out that they also like to teach you, that kids love to explain what they're doing, and they learn more, she thought, because they're using you to force them to use the language. So those are just some snippets of evidence from the transcripts. But another interesting thing that I put in departure from normal teaching and learning is the family and community aspects. So Minecraft is a family endeavor in EVO Minecraft MOOC. A lot of the participants and the moderators bring their children in, and they like to explore how the children learn in the virtual world. So it's all kind of pitched in as kind of a family activity.
3 minutes,
Okay.
Vance.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I've got it there. Okay, so the next thing is about target language acquisition, some evidence for acquisition around the game, and opportunities for language acquisition abound in Minecraft. The people in our chats talked about that. And then there's also vocabulary and spelling and understanding accented language, which I found was kind of an interesting aspect that I hadn't really thought about. But I told you that Mariana had written an article about how her son, both her sons became quite fluent in English, and Philip from playing Minecraft. So he had to figure out things in the language by wanting to learn more about these things. And Don Carroll interjected, if you sit and watch a video, you know what's happening in terms of the action. So that helps you to make more sense of the language. Now, I actually traveled to Croatia, and I met Philip and Mariana there. And Philip told me that when they first started learning about Minecraft, they would watch the videos. And at first, the language meant nothing to them. It was just gibberish. They were doing more what Don is talking about. They knew what was happening in terms of the action. But Philip told me that as he watched more videos about Minecraft, that the language emerged. I really like that. That to me is really acquisition. Now, Jane talks about also other vocabulary and spelling. You can, in your inventory, you can see items, you can mouse over them, they're spelled out for you. Kamala talks about how she had to negotiate language with people that she was playing in the game. She learned her vocabulary mainly through games playing, because she learned vocabulary in certain contexts, but she had to get at the real meaning of the games. And the accented language is another aspect that I hadn't really thought about, but the students who are in Europe are being exposed to each other's accents frequently. Now I'm going to flip on through my slides. You can read about this in the write-up, but life and literacy skills also talk about, I'll just skip through the explanations. Autonomy is promoted. That's important because it shouldn't stop a teacher from using Minecraft that the teacher doesn't know so much about Minecraft. The autonomy comes from the students. And a lot of it is the critical thinking that's involved, the problem solving. So you have to predict what you're doing, and it's constantly engaging you that way. And there's just-in-time learning all the time. So people are always trying to learn what they need to do right now. They use the language for reflection. Maddie, Jane's son, kept a blog and wrote in print literacy. But Mariana's sons made videos, YouTube. So computer literacy skills is also important. Don says that there's a full, complete package of literacy skills and language that goes together. Typing skills, another one I didn't really think about so much, but typing skills is also a literacy skill that apparently Minecraft helped Mariana's son win a competition in. Okay, here are some references. There are more references in my write-up. here are the slides, just as a reminder to you. And you can read what I said or what I meant to say in these links. Okay, I hope that didn't go too over time.
All right, great. Thank you. No, that was perfect. I'm going to switch to my slides. Wide variety of talks of areas covered. So I look forward to hearing more and a little bit of, hopefully a lot of talk between the three of you too as we go on. Okay, just a reminder that the JALT Call Conference, which will be on this very same theme, is going to be in June 17th to 19th. And the call for papers is December 31st. Am I right about that?
Yeah, that's the cutoff
Okay.
date. Yep.
So you have about 6 weeks to. All right. Yes. Okay. First question goes to Vance. Yeah, Vance. This started with. No, I'm going to go down. You talked about this. So I mean, I felt while we were watching that. I know you had the language there somewhere, but it wasn't coming out very clearly, and you did get to that. So I am gonna go to this one. So since we just talked about Minecraft, so if video games like Minecraft have such apparent benefits for students, why don't more teachers and students try to engage
That's the question.
with these things?
It is a good question. I thought that's a good one for James to follow up on.
No, go Vance. You're the Minecraft dude.
Yeah, well, but it's games like Minecraft, video games in general. There's just a deep history about this. Lots of teachers complain, teacher trainers complain that they can't get teachers into Minecraft. They can't get teachers into games. You know, the teachers go to presentations about games, but they don't actually play them. And I guess students are sometimes the same way. When I've used it in class with my students, some students really like it. Some students seem to think, oh, this is a game, but what am I going to learn from this? You know, see, you have to, not everyone is predisposed to playing games. And as Nicholas Carr pointed out, you have to actually do it in order to understand how you get locked into the flow. And once you're in that environment, then you tend to stay in that environment. That's the thing I like about Minecraft, is that it keeps people in the environment. I think I'm watching Bobby over here. She's in Minecraft right now. She's building her experience points. So, but she's not learning a language. But if you want to learn a language, that's how the kids, how Mariana's children did it. How, you know, students will can acquire language through interacting with each other in the participatory cultures. But it's a concept that isn't widely understood. And I think in a way it goes back to teacher training. Teachers are not taught in ways that that might encourage, they're not really trained in games sufficiently, I suppose, in their own teacher training, in their own degree programs. You might want to comment more on that.
I think there's another piece to it, though.
Thank you.
Yeah. And part of that is there's so much out there. It's like saying you should use bilingual, books in your classroom. The teachers go, great. What do I do? Where are the books? I mean, there are so many games.
Yes.
How do teachers choose? And I would come back to this idea of, training is part of it, but it's also got to be looking at what kinds of games appeal to broader groups of people. How do you make the games appealing to a range of people? Because Red Dead Redemption, I would hate.
I'm sure there's elements of it that you would like.
But there are other games that I love. So I think that's part of the issue. So James,
I think the third point here that we're kind of missing is the logistics of it. How is a teacher going to bring 30 copies of Minecraft into the classroom? It's not going to be possible. You need a hell of a budget and a very, very good rationale for using it in the classroom. So that's one part of it, the logistics, which is why well, again, coming from the research side of things, the research on digital game-based language learning is completely, it's not applicable at all in the standard classrooms, which is why we opened up LLP, because me and Jonathan, who started LLP, we were actually using board games as a teaching tool for a long time. We just couldn't find anywhere to submit, because the dominant narrative around games was digital games and this idea of designing games. And so I think that teachers do need game literacy if they want to use games in the classroom. They also need pedagogical literacies as well, right? They need to know how I can support this. I mean, it's all good and well playing Minecraft with people outside of school, you know, with students even, but how do I pedagogically support that in the classroom? What do I do before I play? What do I do after I play? How do I use a rubric to make sure that language learning is actually happening? All of these things need to be considered when we're actually considering using games as a teaching tool, in my opinion.
Yeah,
By the way, Brian, we can see your question slides. I don't know if you wanted to be sharing that, but
yeah, I think your point is very good, James, and that's in part why we did this Trace Effects course. It's a free game available from the Department of State.
Great.
It was what was it, like a 6-week course to teach, 8-week course to teach teachers how to really take advantage of playing that and similar games. And, you know, I think that that's what people needed, was that kind of play the game and here are the things that you can do. You know, here's what students learn from it.
Yes.
What they can do with it.
For example, here's how a board game matches up with a TBLT framework. You got the before you even play a board game, you've got a reading activity. This could be considered a priming activity. Okay, you've primed the game. You've watched some people play it on YouTube. That's a model of the game. Now you're actually going to play it yourself. You're going to record yourself, see how it works. So there's all these things that teachers need to think about when they're bringing games into the classroom. Thanks.
Can I say just one thing about the logistics of Minecraft?
Yeah, sure.
The budgetary, et cetera. When I was in my last teaching job, I purchased 20 licenses for Minecraft Edu, which I could rotate the licenses through my classes, and set that, and that cost me, each one's $20. So, or was it $5? Yeah, $5 per license. So that was $100. I paid for it from my own money because I had no budget. So you can set yourself up, get Minecraft installed on all your computers, and then
you need computers though, Vance. You just mentioned.
Oh, okay. Well,
what classroom's going to have 20 computers?
Well, it could be. I mean, I had language labs, so
okay.
The students had their computers as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's also the things can be played on phones. I mean, and this is what people have. I mean, I was in a taxi in Gabon when the driver jumped out to get a data card because he had run out of data. And if taxi drivers in Gabon can have cell phones with data, pretty much anybody can have cell phones with data.
You'd be surprised at the strict rules in Japan about bringing devices into the classroom, but that's another chat. But I do think logistics is a huge problem for digital games in particular. But yeah, free mobile games like Among Us, that's a very popular one among students, and I've been leveraging the affordances of that towards language learning goals as well. So yeah, I do think definitely the price logistic is coming down, but I think it still exists in a way.
Right.
Well, may I jump in? Sorry,
Yeah, sure, jump in.
May I jump in? All right. As a language learner myself, when I was little, all right, what James said here was like something, it clicked here. How did I learn language? And how did I actually started to become a little bit, you know, fluent, maybe a little bit more accurate, native-like. Now, I remember the first thing I played, not Monopoly, it was Scrabble in English. That was number one. It was so competitive. I had my 2 elder brothers, and we sat there, you know, every weekend. And my job was to beat them, okay? So I did that. So I remember they beat me in playing cards, okay? So I took my revenge in Scrabble. So I remember that one thing. As for, you know, television, I actually watch a lot of television, used to do that when I was young. So that is where I started to get native-like, you know, chunks of language. And that is how I acquired. Now, this is actually a process because it's like I started to get, passionate about it. I can theoretically see how this is very much like my process in modern terms. So playing the game, whether board game or computer game, it's there, all right? But my question is now, how do you deal with that addiction, all right? Because with that generation, throw away books, whatever study or read, okay, before, that would be a waste. I just want to play. So do you come across that?
Yeah, I don't take it away. I'll
That would
hold
be my granddaughter. She's 13, but she also reads a lot, and I think the reading and the gameplay fit with each other because the things she reads about are things that are reflected in the games that she plays. So I think that you can have an addiction, and those are the people who get locked in their rooms and don't move for a week. But that's a psychological problem. That's not something that teachers create. It's something that it's a psychological problem. And there is a demographic that tends to have that specific problem. But I don't think that's a reason not to use games. And the other thing about thinking about logistics is many games are accessible or usable in a one computer classroom, where you're projecting, like a Jeopardy game. You have teams that are engaged in it, and you could do it with cards that you flip around and calculate your sums, or you project the game on the screen and you work with one computer in the classroom. And that's something that that's accessible to a lot more places than individual digital devices.
Yeah, on the term of addiction, then I'm not particularly, what am I trying to say? It's not a focus of my research, but I would say that at least from the teaching side of things, it's quite difficult to become addicted if you don't play games every week in class, right? If you limit the amount of playtime in class, then I guess that may curb the addiction. I also think that addiction, depending on the definition of the term, it can be a good thing. If you're really into something, that means you have what we call gaming capital. You have social and cultural capital that you've kind of invested in, so that you become almost a superhero within the game, and your knowledge is unbounded. If my concept of LLP here, the Ludic language pedagogy, is to try and harness that speciality, if you like, that knowledge that they have in that world that they're familiar with, and use that towards academic purposes. So you definitely need to be a bit of a geek or a nerd in a game to have that ability that can then be used towards academic purposes. But yeah, I'm aware that being an expert at a game and being an addict in the game is quite a fine line, which I don't have a very good answer for, I'm afraid. Sorry.
Okay. Am my mic still on? I can't.
Yep.
I can't see the.
Fine.
Great. So let me ask a quick question to Deborah. I think we have time for a couple more questions. If teachers need to cover certain textbook pages in each lesson, I mean, you have a set curriculum, and I guess this could go to James too, because I know he does teach junior high, so that's relevant to the curriculum there too. So how can you add games and gamification? So go ahead, Deborah, take that first.
Well, I think James could respond to this one quite well.
In terms of games, I actually teach at university. I don't teach at junior high.
You show that junior high data. That's what
yes. So in that particular case, I think that it's very important to have courage. And what I mean by that is to say to your faculty, I have this idea to teach with this game. I think I can hit these points. Will you let me do it? So I think that the first thing is the courage, and also to have that freedom to play, to have the faculty or the upper tier stockholders say, yes, James, or yes, Deborah, yes, Vance, yes, Brian, please try that. So I think that it's both a courage thing and actually having the freedom to try it yourself would be the biggest two hurdles, I think.
I think too that if you look at what are the lesson objectives, and you try to match the lesson objectives with the game that you're playing, what games will help you achieve those objectives, then you can explain to your administration, yeah, I'm not doing textbook pages 25 to 32, but here are the objectives and here's how I'm covering them.
Exactly.
You may just be stuck. If you're getting assessed on, did you cover these pages, and the inspector comes in to see you covering those pages, you're stuck. But if you have any flexibility at all and can explain how you're meeting learning objectives with what you're doing, then you can try to get at it. Same thing with gamifying. If again, you're showing that you're meeting the learning objectives, that's the key to it, as far as I'm concerned.
And also, can I just mention, oh, sorry, Vance, just before we pop on to Vance, but I just mentioned that you don't have to teach with games. If you don't want to, that's fine. I have a very high game literacy. I know that I can hit certain targets with games. I meet my students where they are, but you know, they're not a cure-all. You can perhaps learn or teach fantastically with your own fetish or habit or whatever you're into. You know, it's we do think that games are very good because of the community around them. You know, you have like Vance has been talking about this participatory culture. You have Reddit communities about games. You have YouTube videos. They are kind of the modern media that is kind of the salient through a lot of generations, but you don't have to use them. Okay, so, sorry, Vance.
Okay, well, I was just going to say that at an ISTE conference in recently, one of the presenters in one of our sessions said that she taught in Dubai, and she taught a standard curriculum, and then they had breaks in the classes, and during the breaks the students would go to the computers and play Minecraft, which they had on the computers, and then she would involve herself in what they were doing, and then they asked her, can we play Minecraft in class? And she said, well, I have to cover this material, I have to cover a syllabus, and I'll tell you what, we can play Minecraft in class if you will explain to me how what we can do in Minecraft covers that syllabus. And they did. So she had this collaborative interaction with her students, covered the bases, and brought Minecraft into the classroom, not as the sole thing, but when appropriate on that basis.
Great. Okay, we have about 2 more minutes. I'm gonna, where am I? Yes, I'll ask James this, and I think I'll bring in everybody else with this. It might be, Ludic might be a new term to the other 2 of you, perhaps. But so, James, should we have called this Ludic call rather than playful call?
That's a good question.
How would you make say that? Go ahead.
Okay, so the term ludic, it is kind of academic. I get that it's not that people know it so well. It relates to ludology and, you know, the games in general, and play and frivolity, like ludicrous. That's another way that it comes into language. But I think that the term itself is probably not best for a conference that you want to get as many people in as possible. So I think playful really hits the button better. But the reason that we chose ludic, I don't think I mentioned it actually in the paper here, but it comes from a paper by somebody in 2013 calling the 21st century the ludic century, which relates to the playful century, where games become kind of the dominant media. So that's where it originally comes from. And like I said, I think it's a nice term to capture all of those play games and other things within it. But yeah, for JALT Call 2022, no, I think playful call is a good one, and I look forward to seeing people's submissions for that.
Okay, great. Last quick word from Deborah and Vance then. Thank you.
Well, I like Ludic because I had to look it up. So that helps me keep my knowledge, and it is something. Making that extra effort to have to look up something is how you really learn, how you internalize.
Yeah, actually, I read about Ludic when I was preparing for my plenary at the TESOL conference, and I think I found something somewhere that I've been unable to find again that was actually pretty old, where they talked about Ludic as a way of explaining being in the world and how you can play games as